Please be seated. Thank you. We'd like to apologize for the absence at this time of the Most Reverend Kenneth Richards, DD/CD, President of the Jamaica Council of Churches. Ambassador, have we found a replacement for the official prayer? Thank you.
And so, God, we thank you for today. Had it not been for your grace and your mercies, then this day would not have been possible, and we give you thanks. Lord, we thank you for our Governor General. We thank you for our Prime Minister. We thank you, Lord Jesus, for our Cabinet Sec and all the members under the TOP who made this event possible. We pray, God, that you grant your blessings on today and be with us as we give you thanks. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, our ceremony commences with formalities that record the contribution of the public service in the reading of the citation to public servants given by the Minister with responsibility for finance and the public service, and the reading of the proclamation given by the Governor General on the occasion of the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Awards 2023. First, the citation will be read by Mrs. Tesha Clark Griffiths, President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, who is now invited to proceed to deliver the citation and thereafter make a symbolic presentation to His Excellency, the Governor General. Welcome her, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Citation for 2023 Long Service Awardees. In recognition and appreciation of your faithful service and invaluable contribution as public servants in the government of Jamaica. In this significant year, 2023, we celebrate together as an independent nation the Jamaica 61 milestone. In the process of our commemoration, we are also obliged to pause to reflect in confidence on our collective progress and the inspiration of those stalwarts, those heroes who helped to shape the positive identity of our nation. As the Right Excellence Marcus Mosiah Garvey truly prophesies, we have a beautiful history and we shall create another in the future that will astonish the world. How fitting is it that in this new decade, the 2023 Civil Service Long Service Awards will honor more than 600 recipients under the apt theme, Raising the Bar, Strengthening the Bond. Over the past 25 and for some 30 years, these civil servants were recognized today, have advanced Jamaica's public services to meet the needs of the times. They have prevailed, working steadfastly as a point of cohesion, notwithstanding the upheavals synonymous with the dynamic changes that mark the continuum of the information age from the earliest stage to its present-day manifestation. Civil servants, moving upwards over the past 3 decades, adopted the modern developmental norms required to redesign and recraft what service delivery in a future public sector would demand. Within this transformational resolve came research, consultation, and material papers that gave birth to new agencies populated for services that could only be conceptual in past eras. Public agencies to protect, monitor, and sustain the nation's resources for a viable future. These include rare resources such as minerals, persistent resources such as radio spectrum, renewable resources such as solar and wind prospects provided by our climate. Most importantly, the blessings are made manifest in the resource of the creative spirit of our people. Through the cultural legacy of the visual and performing arts, our sports legacy, and the development of new intellectual properties. The civil servants we celebrate today were the ones who straddled the old system and the new system, thinking through the challenges to keep Jamaica evolving in this business of service to their fellow citizens. This called for an alliance of researchers and policy developers for legal minds and analytical thinking to create new schematics and enabling legislation. It called for an embracing of the communication function within each public entity, moving away from a centralized system and becoming closer to stakeholders. It's called the instituting of enabling system for efficient customer care. In other words, a mutual bonding between service providers and citizens around the concept of customer service excellence in public services. The civil service on a path of transformation, even as the world continued to change from the bipolar Cold War era towards the emergence of new, more preamble axis of influence, serve as an important factor in strengthening the bond between our neighbors and allies further afield, as much as with Jamaicans living overseas. Jamaica thus ably maintained its status as an active international stakeholder in international multilateral forums such as the African, Caribbean, and Pacific Group, CARICOM, the United Nations, and its agencies, the Commonwealth, the International Labour Organization, and critical sports bodies such as the International Olympic Committee, and with her diaspora. These important linkages powered the raising of the bar, even more visible by ensuring that education and training in Jamaica, that our financial systems and health and safety systems remained in the forefront of development standards in keeping with the times. It is evident that for all to see that at the level of the civil service, innumerable challenges have been surmounted. It is through these invaluable efforts, too, that our country continues to be a place that engenders pride and affection in her citizens who pursue their dreams at home and around the world, and a beacon for the positive attention of others. 2023 honorees of the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Award, this citation humbly strives to reflect the mission and essence of your honorable service over these 3 decades of persistent cohesion and elevation, and by my hand today, I wholeheartedly commend it. Signed, Nigel Clark, MP, DPhil, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, this 23rd day of November. 23rd day of November, 2023.
Thank you very much, and we now invite His Excellency, the Governor General, to accept the symbolic presentation of the citation. And we thank you, Mrs. Tesha Clark Griffiths. Give her a round of applause for me, please. As we continue, the presentation of the Minister's 2023 citation is followed by the presence of the Minister himself, as we invite Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, to deliver his welcome remarks. Welcome him, please.
His Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, Governor General of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, Prime Minister of Jamaica, Cabinet Secretary, Ministers of Government, on the platform, Minister Main, and in the audience, Permanent Secretaries, Attorney General, ladies and gentlemen of the civil service, good afternoon. I first want to congratulate awardees here today for your exemplary service, which for many would have constituted the great part of their working lives. We celebrate your service today under the theme, Raising the Bar, Strengthening the Bonds. The government of Jamaica, in collaboration with other stakeholders, is in the process of making the largest investment in the civil service in a very, very long time. And the people of Jamaica surely expect that as a consequence of this investment, indeed, we will raise the bar. But raising the bar is critical for external stakeholders, but it's also important for the internal stakeholders of the civil service. Much of the activity that is undertaken in the civil service actually serves other civil servants. So by raising the bar and strengthening the bond, what we speak to is a civil service that is more cohesive and one that acts with efficiency in order to get the job done. Jamaica's development is inextricably linked with raising levels of productivity in our society, which in turn depend on a public bureaucracy driven by a civil service that pays attention to time and pays attention to cost. Our investment in the human capital of the civil service will be followed by investments in technology that can enable the goals that we seek. For today, however, we pause to reflect and to honor you for, in most cases, your decades of service to Jamaica through the Jamaica Civil Service. On occasions such as this, I speak through the citation, and my words today are just a welcome to say, we honor you, we thank you, and we celebrate you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
And thank you to Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, MP, Minister of Finance and the Public Service. It is now my privilege to read the proclamation given by the Governor General for the 2023 Civil Service Long Service Award Ceremony. A proclamation by His Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Linton Allen, Member of the Order of the Nation, Knight Grand Cross of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, Commander of the Order of Distinction, Knight of Grace of the Most Venerable, Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, Governor General of Jamaica. Whereas many public officers have rendered long series of service of Jamaica, and whereas in recognition of that service, it is considered fitting to honor the persons who by their service over the years have contributed to the nation's development. And whereas the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Award Rules 1988, as amended in 1993, provide for the making of annual awards to public officers who, at the first day of April in each year, have completed such period of service, not being less than 25 years, as the minister responsible for the public service may determine, and have not previously been awarded a medal pursuant to those rules. Now, therefore, I, Patrick Linton Allen, member of the Order of the Nation, Knight Grand Cross of the Most Distinguished Order of St. Michael and St. George, Commander of the Order of Distinction, Knight of Grace of the Most Venerable Order of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, Governor General of Jamaica, do hereby proclaim and make known that I hereby approve the award of long service medals to public officers who, at the first day of April 2023, have completed 25 years or more and have not previously been awarded a medal. Given under my hand and the broad seal of Jamaica at King's House this 13th day of June, in the year of our Lord 2023, and the first year of the reign of His Majesty King Charles III. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2023 proclamation. May I now invite the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band, which was formed in March of 1958. The present bandmaster is Deputy Superintendent of Police Doran McCarthy. The members of the band are all trained police officers, men and women, who also regularly join forces with their colleagues on the front line in the fight against crime and the maintenance of law and order. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we'll now have a musical presentation by the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band. Round of applause, please, for members of the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band, playing at numbers that we're accustomed to and numbers we appreciate. We now invite His Excellency, the Governor General, to make the presentations to the first cohort of recipients. The Governor General is attended by Captain Mario Sahadeo, aide de camp. Welcome them for me, please. And may I invite Mrs. Gwyneth Davidson to call through all the recipients' name. Welcome her for me, please.
Recipients from the Office of His Excellency, the Governor General and staff, Mrs. Charmaine Campbell, from the Auditor General's Department, Mr. Floyd Andrade Beckford, Mrs. Lorraine Angela King, Miss Althea Angela Latti, Miss Nicola Alicia St. Clair Roy, from the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining, Mrs. Marva Allen Sims, Mrs. Shalene Simone Berry, Mrs. Juliet Marion Bonner Clark, Mr. Errol Clive Dakin, Miss Elmore Jennifer Johnson, Miss Michelle Lindo, Miss Sharon Yvonne Nelson, Mrs. Nicola Anita Nesbeth Anderson, Mrs. Nicola Anita Nesbeth Anderson, from the Office of the Services Commissions, Mrs. Jacqueline Bell Rowe, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, Mr. John Maxwell Clark, Miss Lesline Simone May, Mrs. Deirdre Nicole Mills. Mr. John Spurgeon Reed. Mrs. Nicolette Irene Simone Williams. From the Ministry of National Security, the Department of Correctional Services, we have Mrs. Karen Annetta Brown. We have Miss Audrey Winifred Gordon. Miss Andrea Simone Wheatle. From the Ministry of National Security, the Jamaica Defense Force, Mrs. Deirdre Hillary Anderson Shaw. Mr. Franco Sean Bailey. Mr. Warren Amish Black. Miss Sharida Antoinette Cover. Miss Nadine Hamilton. Miss Patricia Elizabeth Howell. Miss Donna Anne-Marie Samuels. Davis. Mr. Patrick Elias Davidson. Mr. Isart Raphael Gordon. And now we have Mrs. Elgiata Maud Crooks. Mr. Donovan Carlton Green. Miss Patricia Elizabeth Howell. Miss Donna Anne-Marie Samuels. Miss Emilia Anita Smith. From the Ministry of National Security, the Police Department. From the Ministry of National Security, Jamaica Defense Force, Mr. Denzel Jr. Reed. Ms. Donna Anne-Marie Samuels, Mrs. Emilia Anita Smith. From the Ministry of National Security, Police Department. The Jamaica Defense Force, Ms. Annette Usina Watt. From the Ministry of National Security, the Police Department, Ms. Claudia Antoinette Ball. Ms. Sandra Anne-Marie Mason. Ms. Pauline Rosalie Mitchell. Mrs. Audria Limon Smythe Ricketts.
Can we have a collective round of applause for all the recipients? And thank you, Your Excellency. You may or may not know that the first public concert by our popular police band took place in November 1958 at Fort Charles in Port Royal. However, the band has since performed in every single parish of Jamaica, throughout the Caribbean islands and also in the United States of America. The band's repertoire ranges from parade and concert marches to classical and semi-classical, jazz, pop, Jamaica's folk, and more contemporary music genres. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we have another musical offering from the versatile Jamaica Constabulary Force Band. Welcome them again for me, please. Again, we thank the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band, and everybody's aware of that song. There's a place up there for you and me. Ladies and gentlemen, we now invite the Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, to come forward on the presentation platform. The Prime Minister will be attended by Deputy Superintendent of Police, Lawrence Ogilvie, aide-de-camp. Welcome him for me, please. And may I also invite Mr. Shavoni Blair to read the name of the recipients. Welcome, Mr. Blair, as well, please.
From the Office of the Cabinet, Ms. Casey Venice Whiteley. From the Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Caron Glenroy Braham. Mrs. Lorraine Karen Brown. Mr. Lawrence Thomas Mackenzie. Mrs. Carla Monifa McIntyre Chambers. Mrs. Vilma Mae Wilson Malcolm. From the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Mr. Rohan Livingston Brown. Ms. Paula Anne-Marie Parks. From the Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, National Library of Jamaica, Mrs. Joyce Evadne Brown-Murray. Mrs. Natalie Karen Foster. Mr. Jason Michael Smith. Mr. Edward Hugh Core. Mrs. Leonie Marie Dowie. Mrs. Grace Magnus Fraser. Mrs. Jenny Mason. From the Ministry of Education and Youth, Mrs. Nadine Eleanor Brown McIntosh. Mrs. Delia Portia Craigie. Mrs. Charmaine Patricia Malcolm Hewitt. Ms. Sean Eleanor Cecile Parks. Mrs. Denise Samuels Allen, Miss Alicia Juanita Wainwright. From the Ministry of Education and Youth, Jamaica Library Service, well, Miss Alicia Juanita White is coming. Mrs. Carmelita Allison Campbell. Mrs. Yvonne Cecile Brown Evans. Miss Florence Eulalie Thompson. Mrs. Althea Cordelia Davis Harvey. Mrs. Alcia Lorraine Ferreira Morris. Mrs. Karen Anne-Marie Henry Chambers. Mrs. Natalie Nicole Hill Chambers. Miss Vonette Venetia Jones. Mr. Jerry Neil Richards. Mr. Fabian Smith. Miss Shireen Antoinette Tyndale. Mrs. Mitzi Andreen Amoy Walters. Mrs. Venita Joyce White. Mrs. Carlene Patrice Williams. From the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Mr. Jermaine Fitzpatrick Brown. Mr. Leo Xavier Byfield. Ms. Carol Janice Chamberlain. Mrs. Melissa Kolash Manahan. Ms. Gillian Corodius, Justice of the Peace. Mr. Caldron Edwards. Ms. Hope Patricia Fisher. Ms. Carol Janice Chamberlain. Ms. Avis Gordon. Ms. Simone Graham. Miss Avis Gordon. Miss Patrice Simone Gordon. Miss Avis Gordon. Miss Simone Graham. Miss Delanor Ucia Grant. Miss Yvette Leonie Hyatt. Mrs. Melody Evadne James Henry. Mrs. Carleen. Miss Dion Hamilton. Miss Yvette Leonie Hyatt. Miss James Henry. Mrs. Carlene Elaine Levy. Mr. Marlon St. Michael Mahan. Mr. Michael Wade Morrison. Mr. Rolando Noble, Justice of the Peace. Miss Philippa Felicia Parkinson. Mr. Ansel Neil Robb. Mrs. Colette K. Roberts Risden, Commander of the Office of Distinction. Miss Sharina Lorraine Smith. Mrs. Dion Marie Carleen White Jennings. Miss Carol Janice Chamberlain. From the Ministry of Local Government and Community Development, Mr. Leroy Anderson. Mrs. Minette Anderson Myers. Miss Carol Marjorie Beckford. Mr. David Henry Gardner. Mrs. Pamela Rose Marsh. Ms. Sharon Smith. Mrs. Heather Suzanne Cunningham Daly. Mrs. Shireen Stephanie Thompson Young. Ms. Delmore Anne-Marie McBean. Ms. Sharon Camille Smith. Ms. Mercelyn Taylor. Mrs. Vivian Walker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. Give him a round of applause, please. And thank you also, Mr. Shavani Blair. Thank you, sir. Now, as we continue, we have a little bit of entertainment to bring forward to you at this time. The group is called Humble. Now, these humble but discerning gentlemen are the product of a decision to take the road less traveled, a cappella. After years of groundwork, anchored in an overwhelming love for music, the group produced their first EP, Humble Genesis. That was back in 2017. Under then Managing Director Ariel or D.L. Thomas. 1 year later, they were nominated for Best Collaboration of the Year and Best Group of the Year at the Sterling Gospel Awards. In February this year, they released the song Try 'Em Out. It's a single, set to be part of their first ever full album to be released later this year. Ladies and gentlemen, performing a Jamaican medley, the group Humble. Welcome them, please.
Failure to comply to the laws of man will lock you away. Do you understand? But the laws of God ain't so brutal, no, no, no. Just get on your knees, since get neutral, no, no. It's that easy. Don't be afraid, try him out. It's that easy. Don't be afraid, try him out. It's that easy. Don't be afraid, try him out. You better try him out now. It's that easy. Don't be afraid, try him out. You better try him out. I'm love in every single thing you do. Lord, you give me hope and strength to help me make it through. Even when I turn my back on you, God, you pick me up again. You'll always be my friend. And just wait, I thought that this was it. Me lowered on the floor, me done, me quit. You reach down one more time and say, my child, never mind, you're mine. You're mine and it's that easy. Don't be afraid, try him out. Say, Jesus, you're near my feet, go down, it's that easy. Don't be afraid, try him out. Say, you pick me up off of the ground, it's that easy. Don't be afraid, try him out. Yeah, it's that easy. Don't be afraid, try him out. Say, you gotta try him out now.
Our Christian people from all denominations, rise up from slumber, pick up your Bible, give the devil a warning. Jesus. Come fight with King Jesus. This a world in a crisis. No time for ignorance. Oh, we are fighting a war, holy war. Come fight for King. Oh, come fight for come fight for King Jesus. Come on, step up. All the Christian people, I just want you to clap your hands. Just clap your hands. Come on. I want you to clap your hands with us. Oh, if you believe in the God Almighty, just clap your hands with us. Come on. We do a little musical. Listen up. All right, everybody. Oh, you know this one? Oh, for the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Oh Lord, sing for he maketh me lie down in green. Oh Lord, our Christian people, hold on pan your victory. Hold on pan your victory. Hold on pan it, hang on pan it, catch on pan it. Oh boy, yeah. Oh la 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 la. You know this one? Things already better. Things already better. Say things already better. Sing for the Lord is on my. Say things already better. Things already better. Things already better. One more time, I want you to do it with me again. Oh la 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 la. Things are. Say things already better. Say things already better. Sing for the Lord is on my side. Things are already better. Things are already better. Things are already better. Oh Lord, we're doing one more for you. Just one more. This one.
I will not suffer. I know you know it. Sing. I will not beg for bread. I want you to tell me why now. Jesus is my provider. Whoa, sing. I will not beg for bread. I'm gonna tell you why. Never beg for bread. Hey, mommy, daddy, Watch me now, watch me now. Never beg for bread. Never. We shall never, you shall never, we shall never beg. Banana.
Have a lovely day, everyone. Thank you for having us.
Well, well, well. I thought when we introduced the group, they had 5 members, but then we had the entire tent. Give them another round of applause, please. The group Humble. They sure enjoy that. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we now invite the representative of the Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Angela Brown Burke, to make the presentations to our third group of recipients. Welcome her for me, please. Dr. Angela Brown Burke, MP, representing the Leader of the Opposition. We go first to the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service. And our first recipient, Ms. Fiona Pascoe. Up next, Mrs. Kathy Laverne Chambers Abman from the Ministry of Justice. Also from the Ministry of Justice, Mrs. Shirley Heathergale Harvey Anderson. Miss Tamara Latoya White. From the Ministry of Science, Energy, Telecommunications and Transport, welcome please, Miss Paula Annette Hamilton. We move to the Supreme Court, Mrs. Charmaine Atkinson Brown. Mrs. Keisha Noreen St. Anne Bernard Mitchell. Mr. Mark Campbell. Mr. Raxon Cohen. Mrs. Cynthia Corinthian Bagaloo. Miss Venice Findley. Miss Fiona Jarrett. Mrs. Maureen Jonas Lynch. Mr. Michael McCarthy. McLarty, my apologies. Mrs. Marva McLean Dixon. Mr. Eric Miller. Mr. Robert Ogburn. Mr. Omar Rainford. Mrs. Joan Russell. Mr. Rohan Thompson. We move next to the Supreme Court Court Administration Division, and we welcome Mrs. Karen Campbell Ellis. Mrs. Norma Campbell Francis. Mrs. Sophia Gibson James. Mrs. Lydia Gray Downer. Followed by Miss Leslyn James. Miss Annalay Johnson. Mrs. Tanika McCormack Grant. We move now to the Tax Administration Branch. Mr. Wayne Everton Bogle. Miss Georgia Rushane Breary. Mr. Lennox Alexander Brown. Mr. Gregory Frederick Bryan. Miss Sharon Ann Marie Campbell. Miss Tonya Alicia Campbell. Miss Keisha Ann Marie Carr. Miss Maria Victoria Colina. Mr. Keeble Augustus Downey. Mrs. Millicent Ellis Smith. Mrs. Marlene Tracy Ann Ferguson Spencer. Followed by Mr. O'Neill Fitzalbert Gordon. Mrs. Alvina Ernstine Hyatt Kennedy. Mrs. Nakia Latoya Jackson Samuels. Miss Sophia Lorraine Jarrett. Followed by Mr. Winston George Johnson. Miss Claudette Algetta Laidley. Miss Nadine Patrina Lang. Mr. Bill Roy Wayne Medwinter. Mrs. Cavell Dion Morris Powell. Mrs. Carolyn Beverly Napier. Mrs. Raquel Anne-Marie O'Hara Dallas. Mrs. Tisha Latora Parkinson Malcolm. Mrs. Suzanne Eleanor Roden Smith. Mrs. Venice Russell Young. Mrs. Carvalho Kameka Taylor. Miss Janice Nicolette Thomas. Mrs. Deborah May Thomas Gibson. Miss Simone Shelley Williams. Miss Leonie Anne-Marie Wint. Mr. Andrew St. Elmo Young-Dixon. Thank you very much, Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, representing the Leader of the Opposition. As we continue, for the police band, music is a proven empowerment tool. The band commenced a community outreach program back in February of 2008. The program members, youngsters ranging from ages 7 to 17 years, are taught the discipline of music and are assisted with school assignments. The objective is to equip young people in neighborhood communities to become model citizens, and drawing on the skill and patience that music training provides to help to prepare them academically for their future endeavors. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome yet again the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band for another performance. Welcome them, please. much brilliance during the course of the week, midweek. Give them another round of applause, please. The Jamaica Constabulary Force Band. Thank you so much. As we continue, we now invite the Minister of Finance and Public Service, Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, to make the next set of presentations. Would you also help me welcome, please, Mrs. Gwyneth Davidson.
Recipients from the Ministry of Health and Wellness Head Office, Ms. Hyacinth Christine Anderson. Ms. Vivienne Dolores Berger. Ms. Tracia Janine St. Clair Chambers. Dr. Tamu Kamina Davidson. Mrs. Vanessa Andrea Hamilton Mendez. Mr. Dennis Noel Johnson. Ms. Denise Shirley Knight. Dr. Judith Andrea Leiber Thomas. Mrs. Angela Naomi Lewis Hyde, whose medal will be received by her daughter, Miss Shoshana Hyde. Mr. Dwayne Patrick Linton. Mrs. Barbara Christina Miller Graham. Mrs. Diana Dawn Marie Parson McIntyre. Mrs. Leonie Nerissa Robinson Collins. Mrs. Melinda Erica Rowe. Dr. Nicola Ardovet Skyers. Ms. Michelle Magniffin Walker. Mrs. Verna Maureen Walker Edwards. Dr. Karen Ruth Webster Carr. From the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Northeast Regional Health Authority, we have Mrs. Ingrid Caroline Baker-Hines. Ms. Nicola Millane Barrett. Mrs. Juliet Asneth Bembridge Plummer. Mrs. Dawn Marie Elizabeth Betton Richards. Mr. Kevin Morris Brown. Mrs. Cheryl Elaine Butter. Mrs. Rose Ann Marie Campbell Andrews. Mrs. Annie Marie Andrea Dean Jones. Miss Nicola Andrea Edwards. Mr. Brian Christopher Forbes. Mrs. Delma Gordon Rose. Mrs. Sylvia Higgins Hines. Mrs. Arlene Cordelia Hines. Miss Ruth Esther Johnson. Miss Jennifer Marcia Jolly. Mrs. Lorraine Anne-Marie Lawrence Philpotts. Miss Barbara Livingston. We have Mr. Dwayne George Mundy. Miss Dorette Grace Noreen. Mr. Orville Anthony Ramsey. Mr. Ricardo Anthony Reed. Miss Albertha Ricketts. Mrs. Belinda Elizabeth Riley Llewellyn. Mrs. Doreen May Samuels Ferron. Mrs. Dorrit Anne-Marie Scott Gray. Mrs. Tracy Senior Cole. Mrs. Tina Ione Smith. Miss Susan Elizabeth Spencer. Mrs. Rosemary Sutherland Leslie. Mr. George Canute Wilson. Ms. Dorica Deverly Wilson. Reading recipients from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Southeast Regional Health Authority. Dr. Kenneth Emmanuel Apaya. Mrs. Marveline Bailey Fairclough. Mrs. Andrine Patrice Bailey Smith. Mr. David Everton Baker. Ms. Babette May Bennett. Mrs. Maxine Anne-Marie Bernard Purcell. Mr. Everton Ricard. Mrs. Andrea Tina Blissett Nelson. Mrs. Prudence Elaine Brown Ferrigon. Mrs. Diane St. Marie Buckley Smith. Mr. Lawton Ezekiel Burke. Miss Patricia Anne-Marie Bygrave. Mr. Derek Livingston Crate. Dr. Hemachandra Chindepali. Miss Shireen Nicola Clark. Mrs. Rutham Clark Evans. Mr. Derek Livingston Creighton. Mrs. Denise Alicia Dacres Reeves. Miss Sharon May Davis. Mrs. Sherilyn Davis Thompson. Mrs. Winifred Willita Delprat. Ms. Michelle Nicola Dobson. Ms. Diane Felicita Duke. Mrs. Chelsea Laverne Dunkley Hood. Miss Paulette Edwards. Mrs. Juliet Joy Edwards. From the Ministry of Local Government, we have Miss Sharifa Williams.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nigel Clark. Please give him a round of applause. And Mrs. Gwyneth Davidson. Now, the men and the women of the JCF band, they continue to serve the public, who remain at the forefront of their minds. The Jamaica Constabulary Force, the JCF, is refocusing its operations so that all Jamaicans understand that they are a force for good, operating within the rule of law with respect to all citizens, with one aim: to keep them safe. Give them, please, another round of applause as they bring us another musical offering this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band will entertain us once more. Keep that applause going, please, for the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band. Wonderful entertainment. Thank you so much. We now invite the Minister of State in the Ministry of Finance and the Public Service, the Honorable Xavier Main, to commence his medal presentations. These are presentations of awards. Welcome him, please, the Honorable Xavier Main, MP, Minister of State, Minister of Finance, and the Public Service. May I also ask you to welcome Mr. Shivoni Blair.
Recipients from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Southeast Regional Health Authority. Dr. Harriet Wendy Gardner. Mr. Owen Michael Gordon. Mrs. Beverly Gordon Hemmings. Mrs. Opal Marlene Graham Minot. Mrs. Jennifer Marcia Grant Anglin. Mrs. Nadine Verona Griffiths Thompson. Mr. Orville Alva Hall. Mrs. Charmaine Nicola Harris Williams. Dr. Sandra Elaine Hill Cameron. Mr. Marvin Delgado Hoffman. Mrs. Jacqueline Delmarie Hilton McLean. Mrs. Marlene Nicole Harriet Jazador. Dr. Sandra Elaine Hill Cameron. Mrs. Belzy Maureen Jarrett Dixon. Mrs. Jennifer Louise Kelly. Dr. Conrad Andre Lawson. Ms. Sophia Natalie Lindo. Mrs. Marcia Colleen Lumsden Graham. Ms. Shelley Margarita McCullough. Mrs. Lorna McCarthy Watson. Mr. Michael McIntosh. Dr. Sandra McLeod. Mrs. Vernique Miller-Lewis. Mr. Lincoln Alfonso Mitchell. Mrs. Andrea Dawn Mowat Edwards. Miss Leonie Vivian Teresa Phillips. Dr. Laurie Anne-Marie Playfair. Mr. Alfonso Andrew Reef. Ms. Jacet Faye-Marie Richards. Mrs. Herman Richard Miles. Mrs. Sadie Carol Robertson. Miss Myrna Lida Angela Rochester. Mrs. Michelle Carey Roper Carty. Dr. Peter Gay Yolande Scott Brown. Mr. Michael Stennett Seymour. Miss Novia Rosemary Shepherd. Miss Charlotte Andrea Simpson. Mrs. Patricia Smith Brown. Miss Judith Rosemary Spalding. Mrs. Marcia Cassandra Thomas Yetman. Miss Candice Nicole Thompson. Mr. Corey Orlando Tomlinson. Dr. Natalie Ann Wiley, Justice of the Peace. Mr. Melbourne Williams. Ms. Dawn Michelle Winter. Dr. Mark Rohan Young. Recipients from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Southern Regional Health Authority, Mrs. Pauline Anglin Ali. Mrs. Elitha Isola Beckford Muschamp. Mrs. Cordelia Jennifer Bennett McCrae.
Take your time. Go ahead. Yeah.
Miss Francine Yvonne Broomfield. And there should be Bromfield. Miss Sharon Joy Burrell. Mrs. Donna Elaine Berth Sapleton. Mrs. Diana Alicia Yolanda Chambers Drummond. Mrs. May Atobel Clark Campbell. Mrs. Fiona Joy Collins. Mrs. Francella Joy Cohen Walker. Mrs. Nancy Nady Davis Williams. Mrs. Shernet Nadine Douglas Muirhead. Mrs. Claudine Melanie Foster Lovelace. Mrs. Karen Oretta Francis McLean. Miss Milady Anne-Marie Gale. Mrs. Marcia Angela Glave White. Miss Vivienne Miranda Graham. Miss Maxine Anne-Marie Gritton. Mrs. Dion Anne-Marie Harrison. Miss Joycelyn Hales. Mr. Michael Anthony Hibbert. Miss Cynthia Johnson. Miss Petuna Tates. Miss Maureen Wyverlin Knight. Mrs. Kathleen Patricia Lawrence Williams. Mrs. Nadine Elizabeth Leslie Clayton. Miss Cynthia Johnson. Miss Anne-Marie McFarlane. Mrs. Paulette Teresa Knight Folks.
At this point, we'd like to thank Minister Xavier Main. Give him a round of applause, please. Thank you, sir. And also Mr. Shavoni Blair. We have a little bit more entertainment for you. At this time, we'd like to introduce to you, do you remember a song called Strive? To perform, we welcome Althea Hewitt.
Greetings and salutations to everybody. Congratulations to all the winners. Yeah. Again, congratulations to all the winners. Yeah. Oh, it's a wonderful day. We give thanks. Yeah. Sometimes it's hard, but try and you make it. Believe you me. In order to achieve, go forth and take it. Set yourself free. With obstacles in your way, you may fall before you rise. But if you really want good, you know if you run. So get up and keep your eyes on the prize. So as part of your plan, if you have ambition and the Almighty One, that's the foundation. Nobody get rich and sick because that definitely bomb. You're telling you, don't forget your friends, where you come from. If you are thief, remember God not sleep. And I know you rob a man and him get well asleep. You all have out asleep, but you didn't waste it because that is a silent river and you know him run deep. Throughout history, lots of great men and women, they went about in the old-fashioned way, but they just kept on winning and winning. So strive, step up in line and go for it. You know, you got to strive. Remove the doubts from out your mind and let good flow, yeah. Yeah. Just remember we are all the winners, we're champions, yeah. Oh yeah. Listen. Be not moved by snide remarks by people who think they're with it. Just keep moving on, man, gotta be strong and don't indulge. Listen, So as part of the plan, if you have ambition and the Almighty One as the foundation, nobody get rich and sick because that definitely wrong. Me telling you, don't forget your friends. Where you come from if you are T. Remember God last week. And I know you rob a man and you get well last week. You all laugh out the street, but they didn't go and sick because God is a silent liver and you know him run. Strive. Thank you.
Another round of applause, please, for that rendition of Strive. And as we continue, we'd now like to invite to come forward the Honorable Audrey V. Sewell, OJCDJP Cabinet Secretary and Head of the Public Service, for the presentation of awards. Welcome her, please. As our recipients make their way forward, our first recipient, Mrs. Verna May Perry. And these awards are from the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Southern Regional Health Authority, Mrs. Verna May Perry. Up next, Ms. Nadine Antoinette Preddy. Miss Tracy Aline Rantz. Miss Keisha Melanie Robinson. Mr. Sean Andre Robinson. Mrs. Juliet Evadne Rose Johnson. Mrs. Vilma Psalms Ebanks. Mrs. Cheryl May Sigree Lindsay. Mrs. Delreen Simmons McLean. Mrs. Leonie Shirley Smythe Simpson. Mrs. Alicia Anne-Marie Solomon Newman. Mrs. Barbara Beverly Stevens. Ms. Barbara Beverly Stevens. Miss Sybil Angela Tarrant. Mrs. Karen Ava Wallace. Miss Elaine Annette Watson. Mrs. Ruby Annabelle White. Mrs. Caller Fiona Wine-Jones. Mr. Warren Varick Wilkinson. Mrs. Audrey Minona Williams. Mr. David Nicholas Williams. Mishina Williams. Mrs. Carleen Lorraine Williams Cranston. Mrs. Karen Elizabeth Wright Foster. Mrs. Janice Elaine Wright Rowe. Mrs. Nicola Geraldine Wright Turner. And next we move to the category, the Ministry of Health and Wellness, Western Regional Health Authority, and the first recipient, Dr. Ricardo Bihari. Up next, Mrs. Shanaletta Booth Owens. Mr. Junior George Brown. Miss Allison Rosalia Chambers. Mrs. Tanya Janice Chambers Lindsay. Miss Miriam Clark. Mrs. Janice Cole-Myrie. Mr. Claude Albert Cummings. Mrs. Veron Ellis. Mrs. Marcia Fraser Shaw. Mrs. Lorna Cranston Donaldson. Mrs. Noella Hutchinson Livingston. Mrs. Julian Jackson Scarlett. Mrs. Nadia James Reed. Mrs. Marcia Rosemary Johnson Campbell. Mr. Neil Carr. Mrs. Julian Mullins, Ms. Julian Mullins. Mrs. Lynette Mullins Powell. Mrs. Janet Rosalie Myrie Gordon. Miss Suzette Gail Napier. Miss Ansel Elizabeth Nelson. Miss Robina Nicola Parkin. Miss Adria Alicia Patterson. Mr. Mario Plowright. Miss Carol Jean Rosemary Rayner. Mrs. Juliet Donna Marie Reed. Mrs. Sophia Sonia Sheppy Powell. Up next, Mr. Albert Reed. Mrs. Lisette Stevenson. Ms. Marsha Anne-Marie Stoddart. Mrs. Sandra Ione Tapping Marson. Miss Claudette Taylor. Miss Cecilia Beverly Tomlinson. Mr. Dennis Wallace. Miss Margaret Waugh. Miss Patma Williams. Mrs. Marva A.S. Williams. Mr. Brian George Ray. Mrs. Winsome Tanisha Wright Balfour. Thank you very much, Cabinet Secretary. Give her a round of applause, please, and keep the applause going for all the recipients. We have come to the end of the ceremony for the presentation of the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Awards. We extend gratitude to His Excellency the Governor General, the Prime Minister, and the Most Honorable Mrs. Holness, who regrettably was not able to be with us today, Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, representing the Leader of the Opposition, Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, Honorable Xavier Main, Honorable Audrey Sewell, Mrs. Tesha Clark Griffiths, and the Most Reverend Kenneth Richards. Again, we apologize for his absence earlier on and for this function, but we thank you all for your gracious participation in the ceremony. Our special appreciation to the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band and the JCF ceremonial team. To the group Humble and Miss Althea Hewitt, thank you for your musical contributions. We also take the opportunity to acknowledge the critical support of the participating members of the Interministerial Planning Committee, without whom the ceremony would not have been possible. But today, the spotlight is really on the recipients. We celebrate you. A thunderous round of applause for them, please. On behalf of a grateful nation, we thank you for your service. The vote of thanks will now be presented by Mrs. Tesha Clark Griffiths, President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association. Welcome her, please.
Madam Brown-Bell, I almost thought you had done the vote of thanks. So I was there really relaxing, hoping that you didn't call me, but thank you for recognizing me. His Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, Governor General of Jamaica, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, ON, Prime Minister of Jamaica, representing the Leader of the Opposition, Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, Minister of Finance and the Public Service, Honorable Xavier Main, Minister of State in the Ministry of the Finance and the Public Service, and ladies and gentlemen, the first female Cabinet Secretary of Jamaica, Honorable Audrey Sewell, Cabinet Secretary and Head of the Public Service. Other ministers of government, permanent secretaries, heads of departments, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and colleagues, awardees, a pleasant good afternoon. I stand before you with immense gratitude as we conclude the Jamaica Civil Service Long Service Award Ceremony 2023. A momentous occasion celebrating the unwavering commitment and dedication of our outstanding civil servants. A special note of appreciation is extended to the distinguished presence of our honored guest, the Governor General, His Excellency, the Most Honorable Sir Patrick Allen, for handing out the awards to our honorees. We thank you, sir. To our Prime Minister, the Most Honorable Andrew Holness, thank you, sir, for gracing us with your presence. This shows that you value the services of public servants, and we certainly appreciate your presence here today. Thank you, sir. To Dr. Brownberg, representing the leader of the opposition, thank you for being here and for presenting awards to our awardees. We appreciate you. To the Minister of Finance and the Public Service, the Honorable Nigel Clark, I extend my gratitude to you for conveying warm welcome, as it has added a profound level of significance to this event. Your acknowledgement of the importance of civil servants is a testament to the collaborative spirit that propels our nation. To the Honorable Xavier Main, thank you, sir, for your participation in distribution to the awardees. Thank you. To the Honorable Audrey Swell, Cabinet Secretary, thank you too for your outstanding contribution and also for awarding our awardees. To our entertainers, humble, of course, you rocked the house with our Jamaican favorite, and we appreciate the vibes that you brought. Thank you. Please give them a round of applause. Ladies and gentlemen, to the Jamaica Constabulary Force Band, which has been around since 1958, 65 years, and doing exceptionally well. I think they too deserve a round of applause. To Miss Althea Hewitt, thank you for your contribution and your talented piece of striving, step up in life and go for what you know. We thoroughly enjoyed that. To the Jamaica Civil Service Organizing Committee, and for those who are responsible for putting together this award ceremony, we also thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to acknowledge the Civil Servants of the Year for 2023. Although not being awarded today, I would like you to help me to congratulate Sister Charmaine, Sister Ruth, and Sister Opal for being the Civil Servants of the Year for 2023 in the categories of technical support, mid-management, and managerial category. And also permit me to congratulate Opal Brand for receiving the People's Choice Awards after receiving 6,000 votes. To all the specially invited guests, heads of department, civil servants, awardee, today we gather not only to recognize the years of dedicated service, but also to celebrate the unwavering commitment that has set a standard of excellence within our organization. You continue to raise the bar very high, and your tireless efforts has not only contributed to the success of your organization, but to Jamaica land we love. You have also set a benchmark for our fellow officers to follow. Your commitment to raising the bar has not gone unnoticed, and it's truly inspiring. We express our sincere appreciation to everyone who has been part of this incredible celebration. It is through your collaborative dedication and hard work that we continue to reach new heights. Let us carry the spirit of excellence forward. Your commitment has been the driving force behind the success of this nation we celebrate. Each milestone achieved is a testament of your dedication to providing quality public service, and we are privileged to honor your substantive contribution. Your sacrifices, resilience, and unwavering commitment embody the excellence of public service. In closing, let me carry the spirit of this gathering forward, fostering a culture of appreciation and camaraderie within our civil service. Together, we shall continue to build a resilient and dedicated workforce that propels Jamaica towards the future as a place of choice to live, work, raise families, and do business. Thank you and congratulations once again to our esteemed awardees. Cheers to many more years of successful service.
Thank you very much for the thank yous and the heartiest congratulations to all our recipients. But today we celebrate you on behalf of a grateful nation. We thank you all for your service. Ladies and gentlemen, may I invite you now to stand for the playing of the national anthem. Good afternoon to you. Please remain standing for the departure of our executives on stage. His Excellency the Governor General and the Most Honorable Prime Minister and all our specially invited guests. Give him a round of applause for being in our presence this afternoon. We thank you, sir. His Excellency making his departure. That'll be followed by the Prime Minister. Thank you, Dr. Angela Brown-Burke, representing the Leader of the Opposition. Dr. the Honorable Nigel Clark, MP, Minister of Finance and the Public Service. The Honorable Xavier Main, MP, Minister of State, Minister of Finance and the Public Service. Honorable Audrey Sewell, OJCD, JP, Cabinet Secretary. Mrs. Tesha Clark Griffiths, President of the Jamaica Civil Service Association. Our departures. On behalf of our oratory team, we want to say thank you and heartiest congratulations to you all. And please note, light refreshment is being served. And may we wish you safe travel to your various destinations. On behalf of the Planning Committee, Ambassador and her team, I'm Norma Brown-Bell. Thank you. Good afternoon to you.